Hello everyone, here we are with the Nexus 5. If you're looking for one of these bad boys today, you can pop down to Carphone Warehouse. They actually have some in stock, so you don't even have to wait for a delivery from Google. So, let's have a look at her. Well, the first thing that you'll notice is it looks gorgeous. I mean, it really is a lovely looking device. Camera lens is protruded on the back, with the LED slightly recessed for the flash. Right, let's take this cover off. There's basically a little kind of chiclet at the top here for this front cover, which we can then peel off. The Nexus 5 retails currently for £299 on the Play Store, but if you're willing to pop into Carphone Warehouse, they're doing it a £5 cheaper. Hooray! So there we are, Android 4.4 booting up. We'll have a quick look and see what else we get in the box. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the obligatory kind of stuff. What do we have in here? A SIM removal tool, otherwise known as the paperclip. Nexus quick start guide, another charger, and another cable. Hooray! I've got so many of these now, guys. Made by LG, obviously, but if you've got the HTC One charger, or if you've seen that charger, very similar to that. Doesn't take up much space. Instead, the transformer part is effectively pushed up the barrel. Much better than some chargers where you obviously have quite a thick base to the charger, and that can then interfere with other systems, unfortunately, you know, when you're plugging things into multi-adapters. So, just be aware when you get your Nexus 5, that it does require a 132 meg patch, an update to Android 4.1 or 4.01 I think it is. Now, you will be forced to do that update before you can actually set up any of your Google accounts or get into the actual Android dashboard or anything like that. So just bear in mind that this isn't a device you can go into a shop, purchase and put your SIM straight into it and get going. Not unless you want to incur 130 meg download. So while we're waiting for this Nexus 5 to update itself, let's take a little bit of a look at the hardware, shall we? So one of the first things is a big 5-inch display. It's basically 4.97 inches, I think, which qualifies as 5-inch in Google's world. It's 4G, running a 2.26 GHz clocked Qualcomm Snapdragon 800 processor. So this is the processor that found its way into the Note 3 and a few other devices released in the last month or so. Now the battery is a little on the small side in comparison to other devices we've seen. It's running a 2,300 mAh battery, which we'll see how that actually performs, bearing in mind that it's not running a lot of the bloat that you get on main manufacturers' handsets, as it were, like Samsung and HTC. Perhaps the battery life will be a bit better, but also the Snapdragon 800 is a slightly more power efficient processor anyway. Now also on the camera side, it's a 1.3 megapixel on the front, not that it really matters that much, but only an 8 megapixel on the back with image optical stabilization, or optical image stabilization. Now, the main thing there is this isn't going to give as nicer pictures as something like the HTC One or the Galaxy S4. However, it does have optical image stabilization, which is a major thing on a handset. It certainly should help in low light conditions, and it should overall mean more of your pictures come out looking fantastic. So, here we are, Android 4.4, the erstwhile Kit Kat. Now the first thing to notice is that the interface has been given a bit of a tweak overall. Things are a little bit more rounded, for instance, the icons here, the access to the app tray, and actually the resolution of the images feels much higher than it has done on even the Galaxy S4 Experience Edition, otherwise known as the Google Experience on Galaxy S4. Very, very interesting how the interface feels a little bit more iOS, dare I even say that, but it does have that kind of full colour, high resolution graphics things going on. And it does, you know, I mean, partly it's the wallpaper, but if you just look at the way the icons are now, you know, fully anti-alias, they look great, they're high resolution, they're quite big and chunky, but they have this lovely curve to them, the phone for instance, the Hangout icon, and even the app drawer. It feels just much more glossy, and that's something very much that, you know, Apple have kind of started the trend with. But it's always good to see Google responding. Now, one of the first things that we really need to do with a brand new device is go and have a look at the model number and Android version. There you go, there's the proof, as it were, just in case you're thinking I'm using some funky reskinned device. Nexus 5, Android 4.4, current build number is 16M. So system now also offers printing as an option within the actual system itself. That's a key thing that's been added as part of Android 4.4. We'll be going over all of the Android 4.4 settings and things that are new. There's plenty of little apps and tweaks and so on. But let's take a look at the Nexus 5 hardware. So the first thing that you'll notice is this gorgeous 5-inch screen on the front, which is IPS 1080p, and it just looks absolutely fantastic. It really is up there with the best of the screens that I've used. And that includes the Galaxy S4 and the HTC One, which both screens, in my opinion, offer slightly different experiences, but are both truly excellent displays. And even looking at something like the Sony Z1 released at the start of the year, even that screen is fantastic, really benefits from the Bravia engine. But ultimately, the Nexus 5 display is very crisp, beautiful colour reproduction, and just looks great. Camera-wise on the back, we've got an 8-megapixel shooter, which is optical image stabilization as well. Now that basically means that if you're shooting in low light conditions, if you happen to be someone with shaky hands, or if the object is moving quite quickly, optical image stabilization will just help the image settle down a little bit more, allowing the camera to lock on to fast-moving subjects or subjects that are shrouded in darkness. And, you know, like I say, if you happen to just have a little bit of shaking in your hands, wind's blowing, you're on uneven ground or what have you, then that optical image stabilization means you'll be taking less blurry pictures and more perfectly focused and sharp ones. Interestingly, there's a IMEI sticker slapped on the back there. Lovely. And everything is indented, so it's very much using the Nexus fabric, as it were, this polymer that is just feels great in the hand. It's not too slippy. It does leave kind of smudge marks off your fingers a little bit, but those kind of disappear. It's almost like it has an oligar coating on there. On the bottom we have the speakers, as well as the micro USB jack. Volume rocker is on the side here, power on this side, and also your SIM. Now, the SIM tray is really easy to get out. You get a tool in the box, and all you need to do is pop it into the side and pop the tray open. You don't need to faff around with pins or paper clips or anything like that, like good old Apple did once many years ago. Quick and easy to get the SIM in and out, and it goes home snugly, and it doesn't leave any kind of raised edge there. It's perfectly flat, which is quite nice. Power button, again, just there, and it is slightly raised up, quite easy to hit. On the top, we have the 3.5mm jack and a noise cancelling microphone. And I believe there's probably another noise cancelling microphone floating around somewhere as well, not that I can spot it. Appears to only be one noise cancelling microphone on this, but we'll see later. We also have the LED flash on the back as well. No word yet on the quality of that. I'll be giving that a full test run through later. But overall, the hardware is quite exceptional. It's certainly one of the fastest on-paper devices that has ever been released. It's the Snapdragon 800 at 2.3 gigahertz. It's not quite 2.3, it's actually clocked at something like 2.78 or something, but you know, they love rounding numbers up. It's backed up with the Adreno 330 GPU running at 450 megahertz, which is certainly no slouch. It's going to be very interesting to see how this stacks up against something like a Galaxy Note 3. Now, the screen, like I say, is a 1080p screen. It's actually 4.95 inches. They call it a 5-inch display, but that's running at 445 ppi, which is pretty high. It's probably one of the highest, in fact. And it's also got Corning Gorilla Glass 3, which is a key differentiator there. This is the lighter Corning Gorilla Glass. It's also a lot tougher as well. Really is their third evolution of that particular manufacturing process for glass screens. And by all accounts, it's incredibly tough. Overall, there's not a lot here on the hardware side to get really excited about. It's not necessarily the fastest overall package of hardware that's ever been put in a mobile phone. That probably right now goes to the Galaxy Note 3. But what it is an incredible price point to hit, £300, £295 for the handset. With an 8-megapixel shooter, 1080p screen, the latest and greatest Snapdragon 800 processor, the fast Adreno 330 GPU, and just overall, for that price point, an incredible package, and you're getting the latest and greatest Android 4.4. So let's take a look now at Android 4.4. Let's have a look at some of the things that have changed. Now, with Android 4.4 on a Nexus device, it's free from all of the extras that the main manufacturers like Samsung and HTC load onto their devices. Instead, we get what does Google want from its Android device. So things are very cut down. You get a slim set of Google applications and no extra fluff or bloatware. Now, the first thing to notice is you could almost call it the candification of interfaces. Certainly it feels like it's taken a little bit of a leaf out of the iOS playbook, but what they've gone for here is something that's fully colourful, bright. Part of that is being given by the wallpaper that comes as default, but in part also, if you look at the icons, you'll notice they're a much higher resolution, and there's really nice anti-aliasing going on. You can't see any jagged lines or any edges or anything like that. And the icons have a kind of pop to them that was kind of missing, I think, in the previous versions of default Android, as it were. Overall, everything kind of just feels that little bit more polished and groovy, I think is probably the way to put it. Yes, that's it. Android 4.4 KitKat is groovy looking. You can debate that one if you like in the comments, but I think it's groovy looking. They've also, for instance, a few of these items have been downloaded just as my system's auto backup kicks in and just starts delivering all my apps to me. But they've now added a settings icon within the app tray, which I don't ever remember being there before, or if it was, it had a really ugly looking icon for it. There's now a nice icon that will take you straight into your settings, which obviously if you long press, and you can just drop that wherever you happen to want it to be. Standard Android stuff, there's nothing new there, as it were. There's no pinch mechanism, so if you want to pinch between your home screens, forget it. That's not part of the Android experience when you're looking at the pure Google Android. One of the things that was interesting is they've released a recording tool, which is apparently available for developers. Now, I thought it was actually included as part of Android 4.4 out of the box, but it doesn't appear to be, or at least I can't find it anywhere. Maybe you have to go in and turn that on through developer tools. A lot of the stuff you will know pretty well. You know, it's the Google services, it's Google Plus, it's the Gallery app, it's Drive, it's Chrome. You know, the standard stuff that comes with Android 4.4, unfortunately made a little bit more difficult here by auto backup having kicked in and deciding to drop all of my apps to me. Although on the plus side, at least I don't have to go and download them all again. And so one of the things always worth looking at on a new Nexus device is having a look at how the settings and notification shade area has changed. So one of the main things is they now look quite a bit nicer than they used to, going with this kind of cool black and white vibe, and it feels like it has more pop to it than it used to do. It looked a little mucky before, in my opinion. But then also, if we come into here, we can then get into our settings area. This stuff is pretty much the muchness. I haven't noticed any major changes in here particularly. The only big one is this printing option down at the bottom. That I do not remember being part of previous Android experiences, and was mentioned that it was going to get baked directly into the operating system from here on out. So if you happen to use cloud printing, or if you have any of the Google Cloud Print services available, or the HP Print, Remote Print, then effectively you can print directly from your Android device to any printer that your Google account knows about. Very handy, I must say. So we've got our usual thing, go in and do our Wi-Fi, our Bluetooth. One major change they've made in Android 4.4 is better support for low power Bluetooth devices, things like the Fitbit and so on. If we come into more, we've got our airplane mode, NFC, default SMS app. Now this is new, and this allows you, if you have multiple different short messaging service apps on your device, you can pick which one will be the default app. Fantastic, and about time too. And one thing they've done with Google Hangouts is integrate SMS and Hangouts into one application. So now Hangouts becomes your messaging app. You don't have Hangouts, Google Talk, SMS app, and everything else. You just have one app to do everything. But like I say, for manufacturers, developers, and so on, you can hook into this, and if you have an SMS app, you'll be able to make it the default from now on. That is really, really great news. You can just pick which app you want to use, and you're not constantly fighting the notifications all the time. NFC, Some changes to the way NFC works, purely from a point of view of making payments. That's one of the big things they've done here. So NFC now has an alternative secure mode, effectively, which makes it work properly with the way that the payment processors and providers wanted it to work. This now should remove a lot of the problems we had with Google Wallet not being compatible with anything on the payment side of things. So it'd be very good to see that, hopefully this year. I keep saying it every year, but hopefully this will be the year NFC catches on. Tethering and portable hotspot, your VPN, you're doing your mobile networks, your mobile plan, your mobile broadcasts in there. Now, one of the other new areas is home. Now in here, you can basically set what your launcher is going to be. So that's the default launcher, and I've also got Smart Launcher, it's just installed as well, pulling from my auto backup. But effectively, you can now set these or delete them as necessary. That is going to make life so much easier for a lot of people, me especially, who uses a lot of different launchers. No more hacking, basically, to make sure your launcher is always used the default when you hit your back button. In sound, we've got the usual standard kind of stuff. Adjust your volume, choose your ringtone, set up vibrate when ringing, your dial touch and everything like that. Lock sounds, touch sounds, which I'm so pleased they turned off by default. Thank you, Google. You have no idea how annoying it is when, because obviously I have to reinstall my device quite often for new ROMs and updates and fiddling around with it. And one of the most annoying things is having to go through the initial setup, hearing blip, 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 or blip, blip, blip every time I touch something. So having that turned off by default is fantastic. You can, of course, turn that on if you need to. Why would you? Display. In here, we can adjust our brightness. Use the standard googly brightness slider. Nothing special there. Wallpaper. This is where we can set our Android wallpaper, including the new smart wallpapers. I'm not actually sure about those yet. Live wallpaper is in there, nothing particularly exciting. Gallery, just my photos basically. And obviously wallpapers at the bottom, which includes a couple of new ones by the looks of it. Oh yes, very, very nice. Let's have a bit of that, shall we? Oops. Do that properly. Hit set wallpaper up at the top. There we go. There's also your sleep timeout and the auto rotate settings. Sleep timeout, this is how long the screen will stay on for before it simply turns itself back off, saving your battery. You've got the daydream, which you can set to pretty much all the stuff you could do before. They haven't really expanded that, unfortunately. So you've got the photo frames, that's one of my apps that's added itself in, standard colours, and the clock, obviously. Set your fonts, pulse notification light. I always get that one mixed up. Get them the wrong way around. Effectively, whenever you get a message or an alert on your device, it will pulse the notification light, which is somewhere here, I think. Actually, where is it on the Nexus 5? That's a really interesting point. Does it have one? Must have. Well, we will find out where the pulse light is, because actually, I'm not sure it's got one. Which would be interesting. And you've also got access to do the wireless display if you want to, which is known as Miracast, I believe, to give it its technical term. If we come into storage, this is where we can do our space. As you can see, I've only got 9 gig available now, 12 gig overall. This was a 16 gig Nexus 5 model, and obviously a load of my apps have now installed themselves. Interesting to note though, if you got the Galaxy S4, then you actually only got 9 gig of available space because of all of the extra stuff that Samsung had installed. So it's really nice here that a 16 gig device actually had 12.5 gig available for me to install things. Even now, when I've installed all of my stuff from the auto backup, I still have nearly as much space as a Samsung would out of the box. Kind of shows you how bloated some of these main manufacturers have become with their operating systems. One thing that we really need to see from Android is more space as default when you take it out of the box, not less, because you're adding more and more useless features. So good on Google for keeping things slim and making sure that, as many gig as possible is free for us. Battery, this is very standard stuff, shows you what's running in your device right now, so what's been using up space over the preceding time period. So you can see here my screen is draining 30% of my battery, Android OS 15%, Android system, etc. Very handy way of just seeing what's going on the device and what might be killing your battery. If we go into apps, again, all standard stuff. They've not made many tweaks here really. I think a lot of it is, everything's gone a bit grey, so we've got the nice black background, grey status bars, etc. But the interface generally hasn't changed that much on the Android 4.4 update. Location, we can turn our location services on or off, and we can also now change how accurate we would like that to be, and it gives a bit more information over 4.3 on what's really going on there. If you drop it into battery saving mode, it will just do Wi-Fi and mobile networks to estimate the location. Put it on high and it'll kick in the GPS as well. You do device only, use GPS to pinpoint the location. So you've got a few choices now as to how you want location to work, and more importantly, thank you Google, it's actually explained properly how that works and how it really relates to saving your battery, etc. Security, it's your screen locks, it's your widgets on the home screen, encrypting your phone, passwords, everything like that. And will you allow unknown sources? Always worth doing in my opinion. And install from internal storage. Basically, if there's anything security related, you will find it in there. Language and input, this is where your keyboards are kept. As you can see, I've got quite a few, including Google Hindi and Google Pinyin even. Which I definitely have never installed previously, and Google Korea, definitely never installed that one. But presumably that is just defaulted in for us, which is nice. Now with backup and reset, what they've allowed you to do is to back up absolutely everything into the cloud now up to Google services. So you can go into there and it just has your standard options are in there basically. Date and time accessibility and the aforementioned printing tool. But overall there's not a huge amount of new stuff for Android 4.4 in the settings. A lot of it really is under the hood with Android 4.4. It's the little things that they've done to really tweak it. Much better memory use on low powered devices with 512 of RAM, new options for the NFC, a few new tweaks here and there, and new stuff for developers. But overall, Android 4.4 probably doesn't offer an awful lot to the average end user. It doesn't suddenly make this the next big phone release or anything like that. What it does do is incrementally update Android, providing newer hardware specifications for things like low power Bluetooth, etc. And all of that is really, really welcome anyway. And what it ultimately means is that, you know, the next generation of hardware coming out over the next 12 months will be able to work with all of the latest gadgets, but doing so in a lower power profile as possible. Everything really with Android 4.4 feels a lot of like when they released the first iteration of Butter, which I think was 4.2 or 4.22. And it's almost about, let's tweak this, let's fix this, let's update this. There's no big revolutions here necessarily in Android 4.4, but overall, lots of little tweaks that add up to a very welcome set of changes. One of the things that we always have to do when we get a new device is check out one of the latest games on it. So I've just quickly thrown this on. It's obviously the starting level of Dead Trigger 2. So you'll see lots of little pop-ups. But the interesting thing here is I've turned it straight onto the highest detail settings. And straight away I can feel that this is faster than the Galaxy S4. There's less frame rate drops when I move around really quickly, and everything just feels very, very smooth. The Galaxy S4 on high could occasionally feel a little glitchy and twitchy in some of the more kind of fast-paced elements, and certainly I'd seen some initial slowdowns, just little stutters was all, in some of the early parts of this level. And so it's quite interesting that the Adreno 330 GPU along with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 800 CPU are obviously very, very fast bits of kit, even to the point where it's making the Snapdragon 600 just feel a little bit on the sluggish side. I mean, we are talking a very small amount, and at no point does it ever kind of impact the gameplay, as it were. You just feel the occasional stutter from the Galaxy S4, which so far at least I've not seen any of that on here. Let's have a quick play of the next level. So here we are inside. And certainly so far, absolutely no slowdowns. Everything is just absolutely rocking along. That Qualcomm 800 and the Adreno 330 are nice and fast. I've given up using synthetic benchmarks really to test the latest devices after the shenanigans with Samsung cheating on their benchmarks. It really does feel to me like we might as well not bother, and really the best thing you can do is to put on a leading game and see how it performs in your hands. The synthetic benchmarks unfortunately are just a little bit too easy to cheat, but you know, the hardware companies, Samsung, HTC and so on, you know, it's difficult to cheat a new game that's just come out and that they weren't aware of. Where with the synthetic benchmarks, unfortunately quite a lot of companies at different times over the years, you know, and this isn't just in mobile but in 3D graphics cards, CPUs, you name it. You know, there's a little bit too much temptation to optimize your software to trick benchmarks into performing better by effectively, you know, if you see a benchmark is running, clock your CPU and GPU higher temporarily, so you get a better score. With a game that's just been released, it's very difficult for the manufacturers to do that with. If you don't, next to impossible, in fact. And so, you know, we can actually get a decent sense for how these games are going to run by actually playing them in a real-world setting. Now, there was a little bit of a slowdown there. Did you see the frame rate just dip out a tiny bit? And it's sort of similar to what I was seeing on the Galaxy S4, in fact. So it may very well be an issue with the game itself. And just the fill rates are just a little bit too high. Overall, a really nice experience on the Nexus 5 from Google. A really solid bit of gaming.